Welcome to Movement as Medicine, free video series. I'm your host, Anjali Sengupta.
All right, so today we're going to be exploring change and transition through the body. This is something that's coming up for everyone at different points of their lives, but certainly during this pandemic. And to be able to embody change and transition can be very empowering. So that's what we'll be exploring.
It's my pleasure to introduce Erica Hornthal. Known as the therapist who moves you, Erica is a board-certified dance movement therapist and a licensed clinical professional counselor. She is the founder and CEO of Chicago Dance Therapy and the creator of the Dance Therapy Advocate Summit. Erica believes we are how we move. We can change and grow by changing and challenging ingrained habits and patterns of movement.
All right, so I just want to welcome you to this space, your space, right? Knowing that we're both in our own spaces, but collectively together in this session, right? And just acknowledge and notice what you're bringing into this session. So notice your posture. Notice any sensations that are just already present in your body. If you feel like you need to adjust or change any of that, you are welcome to. But you can also just give yourself a moment to notice that. So yeah, there might be some adjustments, some movements coming up for you. Just a way to acknowledge that you're here for your body. It's here for you, and that we're going to open up. It's this language, right? We want to work with it. So just listening to what it needs, and then allowing whatever movement needs to happen. So yes, maybe our shoulders start to move, or I noticed neck movement, turning side to side. And allow yourself to pay attention to your lower body as well. So even though we're sitting, it's very important that we acknowledge where we're sitting, how we're sitting. Are you in a grounded position? Are you able to put your feet on the floor or as close to the floor or supported as possible? And even though in this experience, we may be working with the upper body, we want to be able to acknowledge both the upper and the lower and how they're connected so that we're aware of any sensations that are coming up in either or all areas of the body. So just focus now on your breath. There's nothing that needs to be changed necessarily, but just notice where it is right now, how deep or shallow it may be, where you're feeling it. Maybe it's in your upper chest, maybe it's already in your abdomen, or maybe you're feeling it in other parts of your body as well. And if you're not, then this is just a time to notice it, tap into it, expand it if possible, or just be a little bit more present to our breath, as that's really going to support any movement that we do. So the theme that we're bringing in today is change and transition. And the idea is that no matter how difficult a transition or a change may be, that change is possible through movement and through the body. And just experiencing that and witnessing that can be enough of a motivator or even just the slightest start to help us change or transition in whatever that could be: life, job, from one room to the next, from morning to night. So I'm going to invite you to either use one hand or both hands for this experience. It's up to you. Just whatever kind of comes to mind. What do you feel like? What happens? What hand comes up? Maybe both come up. But I'm going to invite you, whichever hands you choose, to make a fist. And I'm just going to try to just kind of mirror what you're doing here. So before we even start, just notice, and even if you need to name, what does this feel like for you? What does this bring up? Or is this a neutral position? Is there a quality to it? What does this feel like?
It feels like ready to punch someone out.
Okay. And I mean, that can be, right? And like, it may look like, okay, I got my fists up. I'm like ready to, right? Okay. So it's important to notice that, just because that experience may shift, right? That's not to say that this is how you're feeling to begin with, but just recognizing what our movements represent for ourselves, you know, and even just how I change position, right? So does this feel different than this, right? Or if my fists are, I guess, palms are up, does this feel different, right? And so I think that's important too, like when we do this position or when we do this experience, that we want to be in an authentic, not always comfortable, but for this experience, it's best to be in some type of internal comfort, right? So that we can just explore this idea of transition or movement without as much judgment as possible, right? We may already be placing a lot of judgment on ourselves. So if this is uncomfortable and I can kind of ease the discomfort for myself just doing this, even better. That's where we're going to start. So noticing things are already coming up, right? We're already moving. But the experience I'm going to ask you to partake in is to actually allow your fists to slowly and consciously go from a position of closed to whatever the position of open looks like for you. Really focusing on not the destination as we hear often, but the journey, right? So knowing that we're starting from a closed fist, and what does it look like, or how does it feel as I allow my fists to just slowly and consciously open. Yeah, and then any movement that comes out of that, like I noticed a little wiggling. And so often this may feel really uncomfortable. So even allowing yourself to oscillate back and forth, or just noticing that what that path feels like now that I've created the change. And what does that feel like for you? What's happening? What was that process like?
It was initially quite a relief to open because I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting into the fist. And then as I released it, I felt, that feels, there was relief, and it was also just kind of releasing and freeing it up.
And then what was it like from here to actually go back to the fist? Because I noticed that you didn't stay there for very long, right? Kind of closed and opened, closed and opened.
It was nice to actually find a rhythm in it. So it
Yeah.
became more rhythmic for me.
Okay. And just noticing, especially for an individual who may have difficulty with change or with initiation or with transition, what you've just modeled so beautifully is that I'm getting to this place of change or transition, and then there's life in that, right? That it almost feels uncomfortable to stay here, and that I need to move through that. And I want to, I don't know, whatever that is for you, right? You were starting to do this and just kind of exploring. And even the smallest movement or most almost like pedestrian movement, right? Of just like closing and opening my hands, saying hello, right? Punching, opens the possibility for more movement, right? And could potentially even expand some part of your kinesphere, right? Some part of the space that you take up. So now we're kind of changing up the rhythm, changing up the pattern, the habit, right? Moving together. Anybody like watching this or trying this out, they may be like, oh, I'm so great with change. I change all the time, right? So that's even an area for you to explore in terms of what is it like when you can't change? What is it like when you can't, either it's not in your power, it's not in your control, or someone else is creating the change and we have to go along with it, you know? So even the idea of like, okay, I've made this change. Oh, what if I have to go back, right? Or what if in my recovery or my progress in therapy, I relapse, right? And I come back to this very, whatever this is, right? We'll just say closed, right? Because our hands are closed. Can I allow myself to move through this position and to start over, right? And what does that look like? And I appreciated when you said, like, I noticed how much pressure I was putting on myself or on my hands. So a lot of stuff comes up there, right? Pressure. Who puts pressure on us? Do we place pressure on ourselves? But when you said, like, I was hurting myself, right? How
Mm.
often do we do that to ourselves? We stay in a position or we're stuck and we're so used to it that we don't even realize the damage that's being done.
Yeah.
Literally, like now I have marks on my hands, and that if I find a way somehow to release or to open up in a safe way, right, whatever that looks like, that I can actually unlearn these really unhealthy habits. Just noticing your own process, right? It was very symmetrical, right?
Mm.
But also simultaneous, right? So, right, like this was kind of all happening together.
Yeah.
And just for anybody that may be watching or anybody that's trying this, know that sometimes it happens very uh, successively, right? Like it may be like, okay, I'm feeling one pinky. Okay, now I'm ready to do my ring. Okay, now my middle.
Yeah.
So how we transition is really up to us, especially learning how it's under our power or control, for lack of a better term, and that you can explore it again another way.
Mm.
So okay, I did it this way. How else can I open my hands? Or maybe
Mm.
I was even thinking at the beginning, if you choose one hand, maybe we choose our non-dominant hand. And what is it
Mhm.
like to, move from that place versus the hand that we're always used to moving? Like as you explore movement, at least for me, I really appreciate that movement as a metaphor. Like
Mhm.
how did this feel, and how does that relate to my life? So
Mhm.
I was also thinking that when you allow yourself the different ways of experiencing it, right? Like this versus this, or one at a time, it diversifies our movement, right? Which
Mhm.
actually creates a more balanced, self-regulated nervous system, right? It allows us to experience more movement, have a broader range of movement, it makes us more resilient, more
Mhm.
empathic, working on the ways that we're patterned and exploring outside of that, challenging those ingrained habits and changing them when possible is really what creates that resilience. What was the experience like just in terms of change? Did it highlight anything for you? Is change pretty natural? Are there any points in your life where you feel like a
Mm.
hesitancy or
Mm.
a need to like limit, or sometimes we're very aware of how well we change or how well we transition, and sometimes we're very aware when we're not. So
Yeah.
I don't know, did
Yeah.
this highlight anything that you didn't know about yourself in terms of how quickly, how slowly, how open you are to change in general?
And I guess the
Mm.
new insight for me was kind of becoming aware of that moment of uncertainty
Mm.
before the change. So there was the real moment of, oh, am I supposed to do something in a particular way, or should I do it like this, or do I do it like that? And there was just that moment of uncertainty before I just allowed the body to just go with it. Like I was overthinking it in a way in
Well,
that moment. So that was something new that came into my awareness. Yeah.
yeah, I know, I appreciate that because, well, first of all, uncertainty is a huge theme coming up for everybody these days. There's so much that's uncertain wherever we are in the world. And I think you just modeled again the idea that even when we're uncertain, if there's some way that we can tap into that body knowledge or intuition, some may call it, or just the voice, right? The body language that it speaks, it can allow us through or help us through these really uncertain places or these uncertain times. And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that even through the body, I can allow myself to go back, right? Like you said,
Yeah.
I kind of just went with it and then the movement happened. And so
Yeah.
I can move through that uncertain place. But even if something's feeling like, ooh, this is too much for me, I'm too overwhelmed in the presence of this uncertainty,
Mm.
I need to go back and maybe start this way.
Mm.
So permission giving,
Yeah.
right? Of just standing and not forcing ourselves into something, because that's something at least I feel like in the United States, I see a lot of with clients is like this need to just go, do, push, move
Yeah,
on, move through, instead of just acknowledging where we are and then
yeah.
moving from that place.
Come move with us over at the Embracing Spirit Facebook page.